Good morning and welcome to today's edition of Empowerment Hour here at Calon FM. To say that I'm jealous of the Welsh not being in lockdown, I think is an understatement. It's a very strange time for all of us. So do what works for you, everyone out there who's listening, and we'll all be safe from whatever this is that is going on at the moment. Yes, welcome to Empowerment Hour. I'm Denise Oliver and my guest today is Ben Calder. And I'm so grateful to Ben for saying he would do this show because as this show goes out on November the 19th, it's actually International Men's Day in the UK. And if you want to find out more about International Men's Day, you can go to the website ukmensday.org.uk. And this isn't about ignoring women and making men appear bigger, stronger, better than women. This is actually focusing on the fact that men very often don't express themselves, don't talk about what's going on for them, often leave their health issues to the last minute to seek help in any way, shape or form. So Ben and I are going to have a conversation today all about this, aren't we, Ben? Good morning.
Absolutely. Hi, Denise. Great to be with you, and thank you for inviting me in to do this show with you today. I love that.
Oh, no, it's great. I just text you. Did I text, message, WhatsApp, whatever platform it was on? And you were like, yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Always happy to have a good conversation with you,
Denise. So there's an awful lot that we could cover today. Men's role throughout history, looking at men and the health focus that is put on men in this day and age. For example, that whole thing about having muscles and, you know, if you're not down at the gym, you're not doing it properly. The fact that things like eating disorders are on the increase with men, risk of health at work, all of those sorts of things are what we're going to talk about today on Empowerment Hour. And anything else that comes up as we're chatting, Ben? How does that sound to you?
Sounds perfect. And I love the fact that you've highlighted in there that this isn't about marginalising anything that's taking place for women. No. And, you know, I know because there is an International Women's Day as well. And one of the things I often see coming up in comments from friends who are involved in that, well, isn't there an International Men's Day? Well, there is. You know, we're here with it. And all of November is Men's Health Month. This is where we get the concept of Movember from. And it's really important that both genders are recognised for the fact that they have their own unique struggles, their own unique difficulties, their own challenges that are down to their gender. And it's not that one gender is better off than the other or in better situations. There are differences that create relative challenges for both genders. And it's really important that we have space like this today, and thank you for this, that both sides of that can be discussed without it trying to be some kind of dominance between one side or the other, a competition between one and the other. You know, women's health issues and women's issues are as equally valid as men's health issues and men's issues overall. And it's really important that both get that airing.
Yeah, it's not about making any gender right or wrong. It's just going, today we're just going to focus on guys. And and that's what we're going to do. What we're going to do now, Ben, is we're going to take our first break and then we'll come back and we'll dive into looking at men from a historical point of view and this role that they're meant to take. So we'll just take a break now. Hi there, and welcome back. I wondered where I was for a minute. Welcome back to Empowerment Hour. I'm Denise Oliver, and my guest today is Ben Calder, and it is International Men's Day here in the UK. It always falls on November the 19th. So if there's anyone that you know who you think would like this show, please put them in touch with the Calon FM website and it will be in the Listen Again service, usually from tomorrow. So and at some point I will also upload the recording of the radio show to my YouTube channel. So again, you can find it there. So lots of ways of keeping in touch with what's going on. So Ben, let's look at men historically, men throughout the ages, and what their role traditionally has been, and why we need to start unlocking that to give men a bit more space, a bit more freedom, if you like, from that dynamic.
I mean, it's a really interesting topic, and I think it's one that we don't really understand in kind of common usage as well as we could. There's some beautiful work that's written out there by Barbara and Alan Pease, a beautiful couple who did some great work on the biological differences between men and women. It started with a book called Why Men Don't Listen and Women Can't Read Maps, and looks very interestingly at some of the biological differences we have. And you can take some really interesting historical perspectives, like for over 90,000 years, we were hunter-gatherers, and men traditionally took a hunting role within that frame because generally their genetics mean that they were bigger, stronger characters. And again, this is a generalization. You get, versions on either side of that. And because of that hunter-gathering, men would spend sometimes days sat in silence out on hillsides or hiding away looking for game. So they became really good at judging distance, judging speed, and judging shape in a different way to how women did. They evolved a lot less language than women did, because when you're sitting in silence, you've got a lot less need for conversation. Women who at that point picked up the traditional gathering roles, a lot better peripheral vision for them as opposed to men's long range vision, and a lot more language development because it helped as a way of keeping predators away, so the noise within the community was a helpful tool for them. And when we moved into things like our early horticultural stages, which are kind of about 50,000 years ago, where we were using digging sticks and hoes, there was about an equal division of labor in some of those aspects, because it didn't actually have an adverse effect on birth rates, which was a big factor within hunting as well. And then when we moved into our agrarian stages, about 10,000 years ago, where we really start farming and we start to use beasts. So we're having plows that are pulled behind oxen and so on. And again, there was a division of labor here, because typically the miscarriage rate would go up if women were working with these heavy animals, because the likelihood of being affected by something like that was much greater. So within that, what we can see is like an empire stage. We then also needed less men to do that work. So this is where we actually start to develop broader levels of culture, broader levels of politics, of religion, of other things, because there were a whole bunch of men sat around with less to do. So it changed some of those aspects for us. We're really now moving into a stage where, because we're in an informational stage, those divisions are different. There are still certain tasks that need to be done in certain ways. And if you look at the 25 most dangerous jobs on the planet, nearly all of them are done exclusively by men. And we're talking about things like mining, deep sea fishing, road work, some of the things that we just really don't consider on an everyday basis. And I know there can be this polarization that makes us seem that men will generally follow their careers and will be in that space of marginalizing their family life in favor of their careers. But really that is referencing a very, very small percentage of men who are in those positions. The vast majority of men are out giving a lot of time and energy to try and earn an income to provide for and support families, because that's our conventional role within society. We protect, we provide.
And I also think that even in today's society, somehow men are expected to earn more than women. There's still that expectation and that projection on men that that's what they have to do.
I agree totally. I mean, if we put a dating profile up for a man, and it was the same picture on both, and in one of those pictures, his job title was that he was, let's say, an advertising executive, or somewhere in a position, and the other one he was a checkout assistant in a supermarket. Same picture, everything else the same. Which one are we likely to go for?
Yeah, the one.
So there is.
Yeah.
Sure. And there is some really interesting gender disparities about what's okay for men and what's okay for women, and how we look at it. And in his work on the myth of male power, Warren Farrell talks beautifully about how men have to meet two sets of criteria. A lot of the time we judge women on how they look and whether or not they're attractive or not. And maybe whether or not they're a good caregiver in terms of family, but we don't consider anything else with them. So, whereas men, we've got to be handsome and we've got to be good earners.
Of course. By the way, I can read maps really well. My husband never reads a map, ever. He just just goes. But once he's been somewhere, he remembers it. There's something in his brain where he can just know where he's been once and he finds his way. I don't work like that. So I tend to need the map all the time, but I'm very good at reading them. And so long as I've got them pointing in the right direction. But there you go, different brains. Okay, we're going to take a break and then we will be back shortly. So stay with us and we'll have a listen to some music now. Hi there, welcome back. This is Empowerment Hour here at Calon FM. I'm Denise Oliver. My guest is Ben Calder, and we're talking about International Men's Day here in the UK, November the 19th, same date every year. And we're discussing all sorts of aspects about men and what goes on for them. And so I'm so grateful to Ben, because I could talk about men from my point of view, but you are one. So
thank you.
So, I've noticed. So there's an awful lot of stuff coming out these days about the pressure that is now being put on men as well as women and our bodies. So what are you aware of with this, Ben?
I think there's been an interesting transition for men. Certainly in the last 20 years, I've really noticed this, possibly more in the last 30, 40 overall. But this push towards a narcissism and an egocentrism within how we view ourselves. And I think it's a very clever aspect of our advertising, marketing, and sales industries, is that dissatisfaction is important for consumption. So if I'm not happy with my phone, for instance, then you can sell me the phone that has more features. So there's this constant nature of consumption that comes from dissatisfaction. And I think for a longer period of time, that's been focused on women and being dissatisfied with how they look, and that being a move towards things like beauty industries, fashion industries, and so on. But that's now really moving much more strongly into the male sphere as well. And you see a lot more men that are pushing for having an aesthetic, not just from having a good body, but from how their hair is, how their clothes are. And we've only got to look at programs like Made in Chelsea or The Only Way is Essex to see that men are changing in a way that, you could class some of it as metrosexual in one frame or another, but there seems to be this build up as we move deeper into the pluralistic stage of consciousness development, where we're much more aware of our identity on a physical level, but at the same time, I think that holds a lot more pathological narcissism within it, that, we can almost take as long to get ready, to go out, fake tan and everything else as women can. I mean, not me, obviously, but, I don't buy into that space. But I think it's become much more challenging for men in that way, and that they're really pushed. But I can still remember, back in the mid-90s when I was at university, being in the cinema to watch a movie, and there being a number 7 makeup advert coming up that was there to kind of empower women into being strong. And the advert started by saying, men, we don't want to see this. And it's an image of a man with a beer belly and not looking very healthy. And then it goes, we want to see this. And it's a ripped, cut man, strong, which interestingly enough is also not healthy, because having that much tension in your body is actually a precursor for pathology later on. And so we started to get this kind of visual nature of how men ought to be. And it's a very old Greco-Roman idea as well, you know, muscly men who can wrestle, and it's about dominance and who's going to be the best pick for the does, you know, which is the man that you look for. And I think so much of this is then confused and conflated in ways that are not healthy for men to be able to have a real sense of their own bodies and what's right for their body, rather than trying to please or provide for other people's approval. And I think that's where the big flaw is so often we're being encouraged to get that affirmation from outside, and the likes of Instagrams and so on just compound that idea, you know, because as much as you'll find that there are females on there that are seeking approval with the types of pictures that they're posting through, so are men. And you know, it's a real challenge for us. And yeah, it's something that I was talking about just the other day. Men also still are given this idea that they're horrible. You know, if we discuss male genitalia are always referred to as ugly, you know, whereas actually if we said to women, well, your genitalia are ugly, you know, it would create a very different kind of response. And yet it's constantly reinforced for men that their genitalia are ugly. And so how do we approve of ourselves within that? How do we feel good?
Also, aware that by my daughter, who reads all sorts of interesting articles that I don't, that there's an awful lot of genitalia shaming amongst men as well. So like going to the gym, being naked and all of that. And it's just like, you have what you have.
Yeah, sure. But it's not good enough, you see, because our prowess as men is based on this idea that one size is more functional and better and more dominant than the other. It's no different than having a big muscle. It's no different than being the person that can dominate, you know, and again, this is still a very unhealthy space. And it continues to add this polarity, this polarization between men and women. I was listening to a Joe Rogan comedy special on Netflix, and he was making a joke about how nobody really cares about men in the same way. And he was talking about the Weinstein issue within Hollywood, and how, you know, if that had been the other way round, if there had been a bunch of men who had performed sexual acts to be in superhero movies, nobody would look at it in the same way. And it was a very powerful point that he was making. And there is this way that we view men that's very different to how we view women. And, you know, again, Warren Farrell talks a lot in his The Myth of Male Power book about how, you know, men are expendable to a level that we just don't understand. A lot of movies, you'll see a hero character who will rescue a female character, but we don't count the amount of men he will kill to save one female. And men's lives just don't seem to have, at a very subtle level within society, the same kind of value as we make for women. You know, we can even go back to a Titanic joke. Who gets on the boat first?
Exactly.
You know, it's women and children first, because there is a belief that, that as men, we're more expendable.
Yeah, cool. We're going to take a break now, Ben. Sorry to interrupt you. You're in such a good flow. We'll be back after this next song. Stay with us. I'm Denise Oliver. My guest is Ben Calder. This is Empowerment Hour here at Calon FM. Hi there, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. We're discussing different themes for International Men's Day here in the UK, and I just really want to make it clear that we are not making anything about men or women, good or bad, right or wrong. We're just having a discussion about how men are viewed in society, and possibly what could we change about that. Because what International Women's Day is about, in my mind, or has been, it is changing, is an equality with men in different situations, so like at work and things like that. Whereas what we're talking about here is from a male point of view, the historic expectations on men, and they're huge. They're really huge. And there's this, Ben, let's talk about men and their health and their reluctance to seek help. Where do you stand on that? Because you're not someone who's going to do that. But what is it that men are, the expectation that men somehow are invincible, but you've also said they're expendable as well. So what is that about?
It's exactly that. It's this idea that somehow actually we're a less valuable part of the community because it's okay to let us go and die. You know, we could take a conversation about should women be allowed on the front line in war. Why is that even a question? Because we allow men on the front line in war. And you could, come from a point of view, well, it's men that create war. But then the question could be, well, why do we create war? What are we trying to defend? What are we trying to protect? Who are we trying to impress? And so there's quite a lot of nuance within that. Now, I think as well, a lot of the memes that I think unconsciously we're passed off a lot in childhood, man up, big boys don't cry. You know, we get ideas that somehow we need to behave differently, that we're not allowed to feel, and I think as well, historically, because it is men that have gone to war, and war is horrendous. You know, I am so grateful, so unbelievably grateful that in my lifetime I've not had to be called for service in war. I recognize that it's probably one of the most horrible things that can happen to human beings, and yet we still perpetuate it. You know, we still hero sell the idea that we're some kind of savior. You know, we still consider our war veterans as heroes, and yet they're people that have experienced and conferred death. You know, so it's a very interesting space, and I think we need to be willing to understand that men are as sensitive as women. You know, maybe in different ways, but we've not been encouraged and educated and grown to be like that. So we struggle with that. So we can have this polarity again of needing to be strong, to be protectors for our families, for our cultures, and yet to be sensitive at the same time. And that's very, very difficult, because if you're going to experience horror, you can't feel it. Because if you did, and again, you know, we can look at suicide rates amongst veterans, you know, very, very high, because to try and reconcile that space that they've been into is incredibly difficult. You know, the world in itself needs a big change to get past this, but you know, men need to be given the understanding that they feel, that it's okay for them to feel. And you know, I've just been having a conversation with somebody recently, a man who for the first time, now he's in his late 40s, he's entered into therapy due to the end of a relationship. And it is so hard for him to be vulnerable, because he's never had the support in his environment to explore that within himself. And this is part of it, that we are soft, doughy creatures on the inside. And often it's those of us who are most rigid and who are the tightest on the outside and appear the most strong and powerful, are actually some of the most vulnerable on the inside. And that's part of why we create that persona, is to hide that thing that we're afraid of expressing, because our experience is that it won't be honored and held and supported.
Yeah, and there's that whole thing, certainly in the UK, of the stiff upper lip. You know, you're not allowed to show anything. I was reading an article about Mad King George. I think he reigned about 200 years ago, and the treatment that man went under in an attempt to stop him having his manic episodes and things like that. And it was all part of an exhibition. Now, I don't know when it was, it's not current. And it was held at Kew House, I think that's the right place, in London, which was his preferred residence. Small, intimate, quiet, that's what he liked. And his behavior, his manic behavior, possibly he was bipolar, didn't really become florid until he was in his 50s, and he lived to be 81 and apparently spent one Christmas in a straitjacket. You know, they did things like that to him, which we wouldn't now do. Some things have changed definitely for the better. And I found myself wondering about men and their mental health. And we have to go to a break now. So let's come back and talk about that in a minute. And PTSD, men and their mental health, that sort of thing. And I wonder what in 200 years' time we'll look back on and consider barbaric in terms of our treatment of men and their mental health. So are you okay with coming back to talk about that?
Of course.
Let's go. Let's go for a break, and we'll be back with our penultimate section of the show. So thank you everyone for listening. I'm Denise Oliver. My guest is Ben Calder. You're listening to Empowerment Hour here at Calon FM. Hi there, welcome back. So we're talking about all themes to do with men. Well, not all of them, because we haven't got time in such a short show, have we? It would be great one day to sort of just be able to talk freely and see how long we talk for. We'd be here for hours, I know we would. Men and their mental health, it's a massive issue. More men will commit suicide than women will. I'm going to say more men will hold on to something like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, than women will, because they won't seek help. What would you say to someone who is depressed, anxious, stressed, feeling overwhelmed as a man? What would you say to them? What would you do as a guy if you were in that position?
I think the most important thing is to understand is that you're not wrong or bad.
Yeah.
Because I think part of the reason why men fail to seek help is because this idea that they've done something wrong. And so much behavior in men is done out of guilt and shame, and there's a very classic thing called the guilt shame spiral that's triggered by fear, often in our female partners, and creates this spiral of behavior within men that takes them into quite a grim place. Because again, we have this expectation that we ought to be a thing. And I think for anybody that's experiencing mental health challenges, for men experiencing it, find somebody that you're comfortable to talk to, whether it be a relative, whether it be a friend, whether it be a trained counselor or a professional, which is what I would recommend. Because a lot of the time our friends are great at being able to say, it's okay, mate, don't worry about it. But they don't necessarily have the skills to help us explore why we're having the issue and what we can do from a strategy point of view to consider the world in a different way. Because, it's all, you and I know, it's all interesting points of view. They're all perspectives of ways of looking at things. And in a psychological case, we call these schemas. They're things that we have a belief about, and that's the way it is. And these are things that should update and change as we gain new information. But often we're just running programs over and over again, rather than looking at things from a different perspective and changing what's going on. So more than anything, go to somebody who's professional and start to just explore it and understand that those are relationships as well. So the first counselor you go to might not be the one that you want to talk about with all of this stuff. They're like good, healthy friendships. They're people that have skills, they're people that have abilities, but they're also individuals. And so to not be afraid that if the first person you speak to doesn't feel like the right fit for you, to then withdraw right back into the shell, into the cave, and not try again. It's been important for me, certainly over the last 20 years, that I've really been working with my own health, in that I've gone to different people for different reasons at different times and explored different things, because that was what felt right in those spaces. And at the same time, I've developed resilience tools for myself that allow me to deal with my own frustrations, irritations, angers, that give me a way to work that through that's healthy, so that I'm not blaming myself, I'm not taking undue responsibility for things that I'm not responsible for, and I can allow things to be in an appropriate frame. Because a lot of things are gone, they're already past. It's one of the interesting things about PTSD is that stick in the mind that collapses time between the original event and now. And trauma really is shock that's happened to the body that our culture hasn't helped us to integrate. And whether or not by culture we're talking about just our family unit or our town or something larger, but the culture has disabled us from fully integrating the shock when it took place. And so it becomes a long-term problem. We have to internalize it, and that in itself can create symptoms in both body and mind over time. And it's changing those patterns so that we can acknowledge that shocked me, that had an effect on me. How can I now process this in a way that's healthy for me?
And one thing I'd like to say about PTSD is you don't have to have been in a military war to experience it. I think a lot of people think that's what PTSD is, post-traumatic stress disorder. You can lock something inside your body and your mind through something like a car accident, things like that. And then if you experience something else and something else, it compounds the issue, and you find yourself suddenly being super anxious or overwhelmed in situations you might not have been at one time. Holding my hand up here, been there, done that, and didn't understand it. And we didn't have the self-help books that we have now. We certainly didn't have the different modalities that we have now. They weren't the norm, but something as simple as a yoga class could start to unravel something for you. And Ben, I know that you do an awful lot of different modalities within your practice. So just before we go to our final break, just give us an overview of the sort of things that are available through you.
I mean, for people coming and working with me, some of the best stuff that we do is via somatic inquiry, and we use the Life Force Qigong process for that, actually getting in touch with our felt sense, getting in touch with what's really going on in our bodies and what they need to feel good, to feel healthy, to feel energized, to feel nourished. You know, we can also look via things like Bowen technique, kinesiology, how the physical body itself is working. You know, do we even understand what food is good for us? Do we even understand how to genuinely care for ourselves? And then using meditation techniques, using mindfulness techniques, certainly things like big mind and voice dialoguing, to be able to have conversations with these internalized voices that we have that are often judgmental, critical, affecting the way that we behave. So tools like that for me are critical in the kind of work that I do. Plus, you know, I'm also just completing my integral relationship facilitators training as well. And, you know, I've been working with Martin Uchik's integral relationships work for a long time. So being able to work with that, work through our relationships in healthy ways, which sometimes is challenging because, again, the sense is the guilt and shame that is often there for men is that it's our fault. You know, we're inadequate, or we've done something wrong, or there's a problem, and we need to make recompense for it. It's a very Judeo-Christian idea that we've done something wrong, you know, and that we're bad, and we need to create some kind of penance for that.
Yeah, it's madness, isn't it? Absolute madness. That's what I'm going to say to that. We're going to take our final break, and then we'll be back for our final short session in a few moments. Stay with us. You're listening to Empowerment Hour here at Calon FM. Hi there, welcome back. This is Empowerment Hour. I'm Denise Oliver. My guest today is Ben Calder. And in our last few minutes, just to reiterate, we've been looking at men's health and men's role in society today. You can find out more about International Men's Day UK at ukmensday.org.uk, and you can take a look at what their philosophy is around this and different themes that they've promoted over the years. Obviously this year it's a bit different with COVID. We're not able to get together in the same way and things like that. So if you know that your mental health is struggling in some way, you perhaps don't want to speak to your GP, but you can ring people like the Samaritans. There's Mind. There's all sorts of things you can find out via the internet. Please don't think you're alone. Please, seek help in some way, shape or form. Ben, what would you like to say as a final thing to men in general, or about men in general?
Men, get yourself resourced. So, part of it is that we don't understand ourselves. Part of it is that our culture is very confusing for us. A lot of our male role models are sports personalities, musicians, actors, politicians, or people in the media. We don't necessarily have the greatest of male role models. And watching things like The Red Pill, beautiful documentary by a filmmaker called Cassie J, incredible way to look at men's issues. Looking at books like The Myth of Male Power by Warren Farrell and his other book, The Boy Crisis. Looking at books like The Way of Man, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, The Rational Male, and just understanding, the way of the superior man, David Dada's work, looking at some of these great resources that are actually out there to give you perspectives on you as men. And it's going to create some tension for you as well, because some of the beliefs and ideas that you have about yourselves need to be challenged, need to be questioned and explored. But ultimately, it's very empowering because you feel less down about yourself and more in a position where you realize that you have a right to feel what you feel, and you have a right to care for yourself, and you have a right to more things than you think you do.
Yeah.
And I think those are really important for men to really realize and think about what really nourishes you. What makes you feel good just for you, and to make sure that you're doing those in healthy ways. Learning to communicate in healthy ways. So things like nonviolent communication, so that you can get in touch with your feelings, you can express the underlying needs, and you can make healthy requests for how to have those needs met. And again, this is just education in language that I think, as a whole, the human race, but men especially, we could do with a lot more of.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Beautifully put. Just to reiterate, this is not about making anyone right or wrong. This was just a focus on men only today. Ladies, I do a lot with you most of the year, and today, as it's International Men's Day in the UK, just want to big up the guys, because overall, we're all doing the best we can. And what else can we do? But if you want to be different, if you want to choose something different, then start looking into some of the things that Ben has suggested. And Ben, where can we get hold of you?
You can get hold of me on my website, which is bencolder.co.uk. You can find me on Facebook, which is Ben Colder Integral Health. And you can find me on Twitter, Benji Colder, and on Instagram, Benji Colder. So really easy places to connect with me.
Just put Ben Colder into Google.
Just put Ben Colder into Google and you'll find me somewhere, definitely. Other search engines are available.
They are. Thank you for pointing that out. Thanks everyone for listening. That's it from us today. Thank you for being with us on Empowerment Hour. I'm Denise Oliver. Please stay tuned to Calon FM. There's a lot more coming up today. Thanks everyone. Bye for now. Bye.